stream. But we're all here for the moment, and it's great to be with you guys. I hope you had a good week so far, and everything's going smooth with your classes as we get ready to return to face next week. But anyway, yeah, so let me start the class off today with just some points of review. I want to just review some of the major definitions and terms that we went over on Wednesday, and then we'll segue from wherever we left off into the remaining material on Plato and the Meno. So this is a class in epistemology, the theory of knowledge, and that means that we're going to try to analyze knowledge and understand what the classical accounts were that trace way back to the ancient Greek world, to see how those views have been challenged, and to see what other insights contemporary philosophers can offer us on the question of what knowledge is. So when I ask about just any concept or idea that we've reviewed, see if you can help me and your fellow classmates by just supplying that info. And if you can't at any point, of course, I'll help you out with that. But let's start off with just a few things that we studied on Wednesday. So what is a proposition, first of all? That's a word we talked about. What do you think?
It's the meaning of a sentence.
Yeah, it is the meaning of a sentence, correct. And the reason that we say the meaning of a sentence, and thank you also, Jill, is because you can have different sentences which convey the same meaning. They can occur in different languages. There could be one in the active and passive voice, maybe where we switch the subjects around or whatever. But as an example, the snow is white is the same proposition as der Schnee ist weiß, because one is just the English version of that proposition, and one is the German version of the same proposition, but it's the same informational content in either case. And I just began with that because it is propositions and their content that we take as the objects of our knowledge. It is a proposition like the Earth is round that we either know or don't know. A proposition like we're the third planet from the sun, just to use some astronomy examples, that we either know or do not know, or believe or do not believe. So that was the first thing. Next up, we talked about truth. What does it mean when a proposition is true or bears truth? That what?
It correlates to reality?
Yes, it matches the facts of reality. Yeah, correct. So to say to you that it's sunny right now outside my window is a fact, because that's what's going on in reality. If I say it's cloudy out there, this is totally false because it's not a cloud in the sky, at least not right now. If I told you that, let's say, George H.W. Bush was the 41st president of the United States. I mean, that's a fact. That's true. If I said that he was the first president, that would be false because that's not what happened in reality. So statements, propositions, if you will, they can either match what happened or is happening, or they cannot. And if they do correspond to the facts, then they're true. Otherwise, they're false. Like saying that there's a porcupine here is just not true. Okay, that's not the fact. Next, well, what is it to believe a proposition?
It's when a person believes that, like, it's true.
Yes, but we shouldn't use the same word in its definition because then it becomes circular. So even though it's a close synonym, I would rather say
to think
or to take it to be true or to accept that it is true, right? Yeah, so for you to believe a proposition means that you're a person who believes that's what, well, actually, I'm doing it myself. You're a person who thinks that that is the fact of reality. So I don't know, take the question that the Earth is round. I believe that's a fact. I'm sure all of us do, but there's a small minority of people out there, sadly, who think it's flat, and so they wouldn't say that that's a fact, and they would not believe it. Two jurors, one deeply convinced of the accused person's guilt, another juror deeply convinced that they are not guilty. To the proposition Jones is guilty, one thinks it's real or factually true, the other doesn't, and so they don't believe the same things about it. Beliefs, of course, can be different for different people, even of course concerning the same propositions, but there's only one reality, and so there's only one set of true facts. Now, of course, that means that you prefer for your beliefs to be more true than false for the most part, because if they were false, then you'd be incorrect about what's real, and you'd be kind of disconnected from the facts, which isn't good. What's justification? That's another one we talked about, yes? Justification.
Yeah, it's like the reasons or evidence to support a belief.
Good, yeah, and it's got like a positive status. So justification is usually thought of as like good reasons and evidence to support your belief. So suppose that your belief is not just a wild guess or a hunch, total speculation, but you have clear and detailed evidence to try and support that. So you don't just think Jones is guilty because you don't like the name Jones. You can see that his DNA is on the murder weapon and his footprints are at the crime scene. And so now this gives justification toward the belief that he is the culprit or whatever. As an example, just, you know, crime legal example, but the same kind of case could be given in any other scenario. Somebody thinks their partner's cheating, but it's not just a paranoid fear. They actually can see in their phone a set of text messages that seems to corroborate that idea or that belief. So, you know, justification is having something to go on that you base your belief on, some grounds, some evidence. And I guess we talked about what's an epistemic agent, right? That's just a thing, a being that is capable of having beliefs or knowledge. And certainly not everything in the universe is an epistemic agent. You know, there's all kinds of inanimate objects all around us that couldn't possibly have a point of view about what's true or false and couldn't take attitudes towards the facts. We had interesting conversation about how maybe there are some non-human epistemic agents, like in a world of animals or even extraterrestrial aliens, if such there be. I was kind of thinking about it too. Could computers ever count? Could we ever have artificial intelligence that actually has beliefs and knowledge? Or would that just be kind of like a outsourcing of human cognitive functioning to machines, but they're not really thinking machines? That's a question, but you know, anything.
Yeah, I don't think AI can necessarily have its own beliefs. It has to be programmed with.
Yeah, so it might just be like it's a resource that only indirectly computes things, but not by means of having its own judgment.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it would generate its own belief. I would say it would formulate and calculate pre-existing beliefs
then what will you say? What will you
right.
say when you're like 70 years old and your grandkids are hanging out with robots and the robots are like, "We love you and we are your friends"? I'm just kidding, but I don't know. You know, the world changes fast, right? If you think about the state of computing technology 40 years ago compared to now, we might be in store for a lot of changes in the 21st century. But I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think it's a deep and puzzling question whether machines could achieve consciousness or not. But maybe it's for another time for us to think more deeply about that. Just another point to raise. Okay, I think after that I tried to tell you guys that the ancient classical Greek account of knowledge was a combination of what three criteria? They say knowledge is a summation of what?
Justified true belief.
Justified true belief, exactly. So the three conditions, justification, truth, and belief, each one is required. That's why they say that they're individually necessary, but they're only jointly sufficient, meaning that it's not enough if you only had one or two out of three and the other one was not satisfied. All have to be satisfied collectively for knowledge to be present. So if you have a belief which is true, but you have no basis for thinking it's true, that would not be knowledge, like the case of someone who just guesses what car is behind which door with no further reasoning, or guesses the correct answer on the test just because they have a hunch, but they couldn't give you reasons as to why it was correct. On the other hand, of course, if you have a belief which is false, whether it's justified or not, it's definitely not knowledge, because false propositions are not even candidates for knowledge. So nobody can know that the world is flat since it simply isn't. The person can sometimes have a justified belief that is false, like all your friends told you that they were going on a vacation just to throw a surprise party for you and you didn't think they would be in town. The evidence, the receipts, whatever they would try to give to you, the photoshopped images to make you think they're in another place might induce in you a justified belief that they are there. But it's based on deception, planted evidence. In a case of framing someone for a crime they didn't commit could be another example of that. But anyway, if one condition or two, or all three, of course, are absent, then knowledge can't happen. I don't think I maybe mentioned this little metaphor, but I'll throw it out to you now. So think of the three ingredients or criteria for knowledge as like three ingredients that are needed to bake a cake. If it's flour, sugar, and water, all three are required. You wouldn't have a cake without each one. But one or two of them are not going to be enough unless they're all there. So if you just have a bucket of water, this will never produce a cake. If you just have the flour, it also won't. So each one ingredient is needed, but without being supplemented by the others, it's still not enough material. And so with knowledge, if you have all of the ingredients present, then you have knowledge. But if even one is absent, it's not enough. So each one needed, but not enough by itself without the others in combination. Okay, so then I guess we started to tell about the life and times of Socrates and his student Plato. And I think I broke off in the midst of telling you about that account. So I'm just going to quickly zoom through like the first few points of Socrates' life and stuff. So thanks, Peachy. So anyway, yeah, to start off, Socrates, ancient Athens, Greece. He was an older guy there that had spent a lot of his life talking to people in the town square. And in the town square of Athens where he was, people would ask him questions, debate with him topics, what they thought about concepts and ideas like what's justice, what's love, what's beauty, and all kinds of other interesting philosophical questions. He had the skill in opening people's minds, changing their views, getting them to reconsider themselves from all different walks of life, and that inspired a following, a loyal contingent of younger guys that would go and listen to him talk in the town square and kind of study by him. Now, the government of Athens, some people there didn't like him that much, so they threatened him and said, if you keep doing philosophy, we think you're corrupting the youth. We think that you're getting them to think too independently, maybe to not believe in the Greek gods. So we want you to stop, and if you don't, we'll press charges and arrest you. So then they arrested him because he didn't stop. And how far more did we get? Did I tell you guys about the whole counter proposal that he makes at trial, right? So he tells them, look, I'm not guilty. You shouldn't find me guilty. If you do, how about instead of death, you give me free lunch for life because I've done such good things for Athens. Anyway, the jury finds him guilty. Then he's placed in the chambers. Did I tell you about the next step, or is that where we left off? Okay, that's where we left off. Okay, good, guys. Now, if you ever want to study in further depth these accounts of Plato's life and his trial and everything, the trial is talked about in the Apology. I think maybe I mentioned that. And the next little sequence of events that I'm going to mention is another Platonic dialogue that you can read if you ever want, and it's called the Crito. So the Crito describes this well, here, I'll just tell you. So once Socrates was convicted by the jury, he's sentenced to death. And the method of execution is he's supposed to drink this poisonous hemlock, and that's going to kill him. But in that time in Athens, there was a cultural superstition but they believed it. They believed that if you have a condemned person sentenced to die, and you also have like a ship that is out to sea doing a cargo mission or some kind of other vessel from Athens out to sea, you're supposed to wait for the ship to safely return back home before you execute the individual, because they believed that if you didn't do that, it might upset the gods or whatever, and then the gods might show their wrath by causing the ship to sink and all of the crew and passengers and its cargo to be destroyed. So because there actually was such a ship out at sea at the time that Socrates was condemned, they had to wait for like a week until it would return back so that they could execute him in a way that they thought would not be upsetting to the gods. So anyway, that gave Socrates like a little bit of a lag time in between the conviction and the sentence of death being imposed. So one night in that like interim period, deep in the late night, Socrates is in his chamber, and who comes in? But it's this group of young guys, including Plato, and this is what's written about in the Crito, what I'm talking to you about now, this late night like break-in type thing. So Plato and the other young guys, they see Socrates and they're like, hey, Socrates, okay, come on, come with us. We bribed some of the guards. We've got these horse-drawn chariots out here waiting right here for you. And you know what's happening. We're breaking you out of prison. This is totally wrong. It's a miscarriage of justice. Absolutely wrong for you to be executed for just practicing philosophy. You've done nothing bad. In fact, to the contrary, you're one of the leading lights of our society and our whole age. So we can't stand for this. We can't let you get executed. Come on, Socrates, let's go. Come with us in these horse-drawn chariots, and we're going to, get you far away from Athens so that you can keep doing the good work that you've always done, and that you can't suffer the indignity of being, executed for no good reason, for no legitimate reason. So anyway, that's what they say to Socrates. What would you guess, or what do you know? I don't know. What do you think? What is Socrates' reaction? Does he go? Does he stay? What do you think if you had to make a judgment on this?
I feel like he wouldn't go.
No, yeah, right. And so you're correct. He didn't go. Let me tell you his reasons, because he gave detailed reasons. He says, okay, first of all, guys, I do agree with you. This is an absolute miscarriage of justice. Do I deserve this punishment? No. So that much we can totally agree on. But he says, at the same time, I don't want to stand on the principle that when you disagree with an outcome of the administration of justice, that you should rebel against the law itself. He didn't want to do that because he respected Athens so much. He says, I love Athens and I love our city and its laws. So I've lived my whole life here. I served in its military. I raised my children here. There's nowhere else that I really would want to be. And I don't want to go down as a person who was defiant against the law. And that's my legacy that I leave behind. He also said, I'm 70 years old. I don't want to live the life of a fugitive of justice, kind of constantly looking over my shoulder, worrying about getting apprehended. And he says, I also don't want to live in exile. I don't want to go so far away from Athens because this is my only home. This is where I want to always be. So I'm going to live and die in Athens. And then he also said this, I believe I've got an immortal soul. And so I'm not even fearful of death at all. If I die, my soul just goes up with the heavenly forms where it's just going to repose forever. So nothing can be done to harm me. And they try to reason with him to change his mind, but he's very firm in his decision. So he stands his ground and he doesn't leave. Next day or so, the ship does return from its mission. And then Socrates is executed by poisoning of hemlock. Now, there's this there's this like Renaissance classical painting, Death of Socrates. And in the image, if you look at it, he's like reclining on a table, and he's surrounded on all sides by these young folks that were his followers, including Plato. And in the painting, he's got this, poignant pose, which is he's got his index finger pointed up towards the sky. And, it's art, so there's always symbolism. Maybe what could it indicate that there's further truth that I want people to pursue after me, or maybe my soul's going up to the heavens. But anyway, that's how his life ends. And afterwards, Plato goes on to found the first institute of higher learning in the West, which is Plato's Academy, kind of like a very ancient Greek ancestor of our modern university system. And one of his students is a couple generations younger than him. This is an older Plato now. But one of his students, in turn, then becomes Aristotle, who goes to the academy. And Aristotle, as you know, is one of the great names in the lineage of Greek thought. He then, as he becomes older, Aristotle becomes a tutor to Alexander the Great, who then ends up conquering a whole bunch of lands in Europe and elsewhere, further disseminating and preserving the Greek doctrine. And here we are, and it's 500 years later, and we're still talking about the life of Socrates today in this meeting here. Now, one thing I think probably is true, it's maybe a matter of informed speculation, but I think that Socrates' decision not to have escaped captivity was probably something that enhances his legacy in the end, because it almost makes him, if you think about it, like a martyr-like figure for the establishment of philosophy, somebody who would rather die recognized as a great mind than as a fugitive from the law. So it might be something that contributes to the durability of his legacy, because if he had just escaped, he might have been just relegated to the dustbin of history. But anyway, okay, so we've now learned all about the life and times of Socrates and to a lesser extent Plato. Now we are going to jump into the Platonic dialogue that we have assigned for this week that I sent to you guys. That's not the whole dialogue, it's a short extract from it, but it's the piece of it that's the most relevant for the epistemological discussions that we're having. So this is Plato's dialogue, which is called the Meno. And maybe I said this, but I'll just repeat. The Platonic dialogues often feature Socrates as the main speaker and character who advances all these ideas and arguments. Some have argued that some elements of the Platonic dialogues where Socrates is included could be embellishments of Socrates, the historical figure, where he's used as a sort of mouthpiece for Plato's own ideas. But he was a real living person. He's not a myth. There are other records that are contemporaneous at the time, like Aristophanes, the playwright, wrote a play called The Clouds, where Socrates is depicted. And so we know for a fact that he did exist and live. And there's always going to be some scholarly debate about how much of the Socrates in these dialogues is the historical one and how much is Plato's invention, but the truth is somewhere in the middle, I'm sure. So, okay. The Meno, one dialogue that Plato wrote, which gives us a great insight into the ancient Greek account of knowledge. Let me read a little of it, and I'll just walk you through it because there's enough, it's short enough that we can really just kind of go through it all together. So Socrates and Meno. Meno is a Greek general, and that's the namesake of the dialogue here. So Socrates and him are just having a chat, and here's what Socrates says. So he says, Meno, a man who knew the way to Larissa or anywhere else you like and went there and guided others would surely lead them well and correctly? Meno says, certainly, Socrates. Okay, now I'm going to pause at various points here to kind of give you context and explanation. This first little back and forth, he says, a man who knew the way to Larissa or anywhere else you like and went there and guided others would surely lead them well and correctly. Meno's answer, certainly. Okay, what's Larissa? Larissa is a city in Greece that's about 100 miles north of Athens, where they are at. And it's also the birthplace of Meno, so it's a familiar location to him that Socrates is referring to. And the question that he asks Meno is this, just to sort of say it in another way. He's asking him, if somebody knows how to get to Larissa from here where we are in Athens, like they know how to get there, they've made the journey many times, couldn't they lead other people correctly to that same destination of Larissa? And Meno says, yes, of course. To make that relatable to you, I guess, you're probably not on the campus of Chapman right now, I'm supposing. You're like in your dorm, your house, your apartment, whatever. But don't you know how to get to Chapman from where you're at? I'm assuming probably many of you do, even though we haven't had a ton of physical classes lately. So if you know how to get from point A to B, where point A is wherever you are now, and point B is like, say, our classroom that we'll be in on Monday, then couldn't you lead a person to that classroom or that campus that's never been there? Simple question, right? If you know how to get to somewhere, then couldn't you use the knowledge of the destination and the route to lead a new person there, okay? I like it when we're in person, because when I make this example, when we're all in person, it's easier. I'm like, here we all are in class. Now you know how to get home from here, right? So you could easily lead someone to your home. So I'm just trying to flip it around right now because you're actually at your home. But anyway, you understand the question. The question is like, take an arbitrary location where somebody knows how to get there because they've gone there many times. And if they know how to get to that place, couldn't they lead people there and successfully get to the destination based on the knowledge? Meno says certainly. Okay, so clear. Now here's the next question from Socrates to follow up. He asks, okay, Meno, so what if someone had had a correct opinion as to which was the way, but had not gone there, nor indeed had knowledge of it? Would he not also lead correctly? And then Meno again says, certainly, Socrates. So now this is a slightly different question. The first one was, what if someone knows how to get there? And the answer was, sure, they could lead people. Now the question is, what if someone did not know, but they did have a correct opinion, even though they've never gone and they don't know the way themselves? And again, Meno says, yes, that would also function to lead people there successfully. Now let me expand on that a little. What does he mean with the terminology correct opinion, and how is that different from knowledge? Okay, so a correct opinion is just a phrase that refers to having two of the three parts of our definition of knowledge without the other one. So just thinking of language and thinking of what these are synonymous with, what do you think a correct opinion is in terms of JTB? Which of the two conditions does correct opinion stand for? Yeah, sure.
Belief.
Belief is the opinion part, right? And what's the other condition that's mentioned?
True.
Truth, because correct is equivalent to true. You know what I mean? Like, if you get the correct answer, you got the true answer. So no mention of justification is there. No, it's just true belief without justification. You got that? Okay. Okay, true belief without justification. So the second question is, what if someone doesn't know because they haven't gone there, but they do have a correct opinion about how to get there, meaning they have a belief about how to get there, which happens to be true, even though there's no evidence that they have that it is true. Now, let me try and think of an example that makes some relevance to our contemporary lives. In the modern world we're living in, sometimes you're trying to get to a place and you've never gone there before, but you still have like an external aid that can guide you there successfully. So for all of us in this world, the 21st century, if you don't know how to get somewhere and you're going to go there anyway, you've never made the journey, you don't know the route by heart, what kind of thing might you use to help you get there?
A map.
A map, sure, or even in a more digital world, right? Like a GPS navigation system.
Yeah, just like our smartphone.
Yeah, smartphone,
Because
Google Maps, right?
Pretty much that has everything on it.
Exactly, right? That's like a constant resource that I'm always using to go to like restaurants, places I've never been, people's addresses. Okay, so think about his second question sort of in those terms. Suppose that someone doesn't really know the route, but they are relying on an accurate map with true instructions. Couldn't they still lead people using the correct opinion, even though it's not knowledge? And again, Meno says yes. So let me read on. So then from there, Socrates says, and as long as he has the right opinion about that of which the other has knowledge, he will not be a worse guide than the one who knows, since he has a true opinion, though it is not knowledge. And Meno says, in no way will he be a worse guide. Okay, so from there, Socrates wants to press the question a little further, like, is there any difference in terms of value between knowing the route and just having an accurate map? So he says that. He says, so correct opinion is no less useful than knowledge? He asks that to Meno. Meno replies, yes, to this extent, Socrates, but the man who has knowledge will always succeed, whereas he who has true opinion will only succeed at times. Okay? Now, what they're talking about now is this. Would there be any benefit or additional advantage to actually knowing the route by heart, as opposed to trusting a map, but you've never used the map and you never made the journey? Like, can you think of that? Like, since we all use these navigation systems and so on, is there any additional virtue or benefit that comes from knowing how to get there without having to rely on the map or the smartphone? What would be that benefit, if any? Because that's what Socrates is asking. Is it less useful? Is it any less useful to have the map as opposed to the real knowledge? What do you think?
I would say technology can fail.
Mhm.
So it's vitally important that you have some extant knowledge without technological assistance.
Very good. Yeah. And I would think the same, because sometimes even when you're relying on a well-functioning navigation system, there might be road closures, there might be glitches in the system. And if you know the route, because you've done it so many times on your own, then you'll easily be able to correct your course. Or, for example, you'll know whether to trust the directions themselves or not if they are reporting for you to go somewhere that doesn't look available on the roadway. So a person who has never made the journey and is strictly relying on a true set of instructions might at times doubt whether the instructions are true because they've never relied on them before. But a person who has the knowledge will always be able to navigate the course because they have such detailed background information about what all the alternate routes could be and about how to overcome perhaps obstacles along the way. Like suppose that there was a road sign which was not clearly marked and it was hard for you to associate what it says with what's written on the map. If you know the route, then the smudged road sign would not throw you off at all, and you would be able to follow your knowledge to the destination. That's kind of what Meno says when he says, so again, Socrates asked him, so correct opinion is no less useful than knowledge? Meno fires back, well, to that extent, Socrates, but the man who has knowledge will always succeed, whereas he who has true opinion will only succeed at times. Now, I like Meno's response, but Socrates, he's being a little stubborn here, and he says to Meno after that, how do you mean? Won't he who has the right opinion always succeed as long as the opinion is right? And that's kind of like saying, why is it better to know, Meno? Because as long as the map is working, well, by definition of it's working correctly, won't it lead you there correctly? And so Meno then kind of relents a little bit, and he says, that appears to be so of necessity. And it's making me wonder, Socrates, if that is true, why is knowledge valued more highly than a correct opinion? And why are they different? And so now Socrates is ready to tell him his point of view on why knowledge has this greater value and status than just a mere correct opinion. So he says, do you know why you're wondering, or should I tell you? And Meno says, by all means, tell me, Socrates. So here is a key passage. Socrates says, it is because you have paid no attention to the statues of Daedalus, but perhaps there are none in Thessaly, which is where Meno now lives. So I have to do a little pause to explain to you guys this myth and the legend of the statues of Daedalus, because that's what's being referred to here by the great philosopher Socrates. So the name is this, Daedalus, Daedalus. And this was a famed and well-known sculptor in ancient Greece. He was known and he had a reputation for making the most lifelike, realistic sculptures of human figures that anyone had seen. And because of the realism and detail of his sculptures, a myth and a superstition developed around him. And this was what it was, but I'm going to see if you can sort of intuit what it is. So they thought that if you ever acquired one of these priceless statues of Daedalus, that the best thing you should do is secure the statue into the ground with ropes, because they thought that these statues were so completely realistic that if you did not tie them and attach them into the ground by ropes, then the moment that you weren't looking or you were asleep at night, that they would just what? What do you think was the myth? Why
They'd
time
run away.
that they'd run away, that they'd come to life or whatever, turn real or animated, and then they would go off and run off. So you better tie them into the ground with ropes, because these ropes make sure that they can't escape and that they get to be retained and get to keep them. Now, this is all going to be a metaphor, guys. What he's doing here is he's constructing a metaphor. So the statues that do not have any ropes have some value. They're beautiful statues. But the problem is they won't stay for very long. So it adds and enhances value to add the ropes, because the ropes ensure that they remain with you and that they get retained. So they just don't escape and go away. So now the ropes have this basing function. They allow you to keep the same beautiful statue, not just for the moment, but for the long term. And this is all a big analogy, because statues without ropes, that's a symbol of a correct opinion. In other words, a true belief with no what? Please.
Justification.
Yeah, with no justification. That's right. So that's a metaphor for true beliefs without justification, or in other words, correct opinions. And so, if you're following this little explanation, what are the ropes symbolic of? The ropes that you could add to these untethered statues are supposed to be symbols for, let me know. The ropes are parallel to,
Justifications.
That's right, exactly. They're parallel to justification. So that's what the ropes are symbolic of. Ropes equal justification. Okay, so I'm going to speak on this for a minute, and then I'm going to go back to the text so you can see the way that the author put it. But what he's saying to you is this: if you could choose between having one of these statues with the ropes or without the ropes, what would be better? Question. With or without ropes, the statues, what would be better?
With?
With, of course. Why?
Because they're not going to run away.
Because they're not going to run away. Because then you get to keep them and they get to stay there longer with you. Otherwise, without those ropes, they're gone, or they won't stay long. Now, what he's saying by metaphor is that if you have a true belief, it could either have justification with it or not. Okay, so like the true belief is like the symbol of the statue, but it could either have justification or not. When it has justification, it's like the statue that has those ropes attached to it. And the justification with your true belief, in the same way as with the statues, this justified true belief, when it is justified, the justification prevents it from leaving your mind, okay? It allows you to retain the true belief for a long time. So remember I told you earlier about an example of a student who just randomly guesses the correct answer on a test, right? And they got the correct answer, but they didn't really know it because they had no what? No justification that it was correct. If you ask that same person a year, 10 years later, that same question, do you think they'll remember the right answer? Probably not, because it wasn't based on anything in the first place. So what kind of information does get retained in your mind? It's when you have all the facts and evidence that indicates why it is true present to your mind. That's when you remember things, but you forget information when you just like have it in the mind for the moment, but you have no idea why it's true. Okay, so the reason that Socrates thinks knowledge is more valuable than correct opinion is because knowledge adds that ingredient of justification to the correct opinion, allowing it to remain in your mind so that you don't change your mind about it or forget it. Because when you have no evidence for something that you believe, even if it is true, you're likely to forget that true fact or change your mind about it because you're not even aware of the evidence that is supportive of it. Okay, now I'll read from him and you can hear his words. He says, it's because you paid no attention to the statues of Daedalus, but perhaps there are none in Thessaly. Meno says, what do you have in mind when you say that? Socrates says, that they too run away and escape if one does not tie them down, but they remain in place if they are tied down. Meno says, so what? So Socrates goes on. He says, to acquire an untied work of Daedalus is not worth much, like acquiring a runaway slave, because it does not remain. But it is worth much if it is tied down, because his works are very beautiful. What am I thinking of when I say this? True opinions. Because true opinions, as long as they remain, are a fine thing, and all they do is good. But they are not willing to remain long, and they escape from a man's mind, so that they are not worth much until one ties them down by giving an account of the reason why. And that, my friend, is as we previously agreed. After they are tied down, in the first place they become knowledge, and then they remain in place. That is why knowledge is valued more than correct opinion, and knowledge differs from correct opinion because it is tied down. And Meno says, yes, by God, Socrates, by Zeus, Socrates. It seems to be something like that. And so Socrates just closes by saying, indeed, I too speak as one who does not have knowledge but is guessing. However, I certainly don't think I'm guessing that right opinion is different from knowledge. If I claim to know anything, and I would make that claim about few things, I would put that down as one of the things that I do know, that knowledge is different from correct opinion. Okay, so just reviewing some of the major elements of this piece. Oh yeah, but question from you, sure, Camille.
I have a question about the thing written on the board. So, like, should it say without ropes? Because with ropes, wouldn't that be with the justification?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm hoping that others took the same association without. I put the slash with the intention of putting the O on the other side. You know, otherwise I would have just said with. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Perfect. Yeah. Let me make sure that that's clear to all. When the statues have no ropes, they don't have justification on analogy with true beliefs. So yes, untied statues are missing ropes. The ropes are symbols of justification. So adding the ropes is like adding justification to a true belief, converting it into knowledge. Okay, so the point of Socrates is that justification is what transforms what otherwise would have been just a correct opinion, a lucky guess, into something that has the status of knowledge. And with the addition of that justification element, it bases and grounds the true belief. I've always thought it's interesting reading this dialogue and thinking about how all of our metaphors which describe being justified in believing something kind of mirror the language of using ropes to tie things to the ground. Because when people have beliefs that are very well justified, what do they say? My belief is well based. And basing something is literally what these ropes do to the statue. Or sometimes you say, my belief has foundations. And the statues are founded literally in a physical sense by the ropes. Sometimes we say, my beliefs have good grounding or grounds. And in this case, literally, the statues are grounded to the ground by the ropes. So beliefs that are justified stick in your mind, and you get to keep them forever. But when you have beliefs that are true and there's no evidence for them, they get lost, forgotten, or changed. As an example, suppose I'm a lover of science fiction, which I guess in a way I kind of am. And so I think it would be cool and interesting if there was life on another planet somewhere in the universe. So let's suppose I just want to believe that's true. But then, you know, maybe later on, 6 months or so later, something depressing is happening. I'm looking at the universe and I'm like, it is a miracle that even humans exist. This big, cold, dead universe, come on, there's no life. I'll keep changing my mind perhaps, flip-flopping back and forth. But what would have to happen, or what could happen, that would make me stop debating this forever? If we got strong evidence that what?
If we actually had a real extraterrestrial spacecraft come into the sky, land at LAX, and then
Sure. I mean, that's a little bit even more than I might need, right? Like, so it doesn't have to be that specific scenario, but in general, it would just have to be some kind of very clear evidence that arrives that there's life. It could be like the Mars rover, you know, finds something on Mars, it beams back little worm-like paramecium on the side of a rock. And then after that, the whole scientific community in the world would say, we know there's life out there. And this is now no longer a matter for speculation, but something that we know. So at that point, with the evidence, you wouldn't be likely to change your mind about it, to doubt it, or to keep waffling on the question. So true beliefs, which are based on nothing, don't necessarily stick firmly in your mind. But the justification are like these ropes that keep that true belief grounded in your mind so that you get to have the utility of the true belief, not just for the moment or for a temporary period, but for all time going forward. Okay, so if Socrates was being asked, why would it be better to know something as opposed to just be getting it right by guessing? He would say it is because knowing involves more than just having a true opinion, but having justification bound up with it. And that justification secures the belief to your belief system on a parallel with how these ropes are said to ground the literal statues in the statues of Daedalus example. Okay, so let me just kind of recap all the main material here. But do you have any questions about any of these ideas or concepts that we presented today? I mean, I know it's heady material, and so sometimes students, you know, find some of it unclear, or some parts that they'd like to go over again. This bit about the statues and ropes could be a little tricky for some, but just keep in mind that it is an analogy, right? A is to B as B is to C, right? So the ropes stand to the statues as justification stands to a correct opinion that doesn't have justification prior to that. With the addition of this, stability is achieved. Retention is achieved. Not leaving or going away is what is resulting from either the ropes basing the statues or from justification basing your beliefs. So I mean, yeah, that's pretty much all I had for us today. Let me go ahead, I'll just recap all the major points. So we've started off on our journey to epistemology by learning some fundamental vocabulary terms together with the classical Greek account of knowledge. This Greek account of knowledge, justified true belief, remained dominant for thousands of years. It was really the received view in all academic discussions in the West of knowledge, all the way up until, randomly, 1963, when an American philosopher named Edmund Gettier published this revolutionary short paper, which basically called all of this into question and showed that the definition of the Greeks' justified true belief was not fully adequate or complete. And so when we return on Monday, we're really going to start showing how this modern day 20th century American philosopher Gettier demonstrated and proved through a very interesting and small piece of writing, it's only 2 pages, that justified true belief is not a fully satisfactory definition of knowledge. His basic point will be that it's possible in certain cases to have a justified true belief and still not to have knowledge. And if that is true, then the definition as given is incomplete. There's some missing criteria that have to be added to it. And that is what the world of epistemology is still struggling with. How can we fix or revise the definition of knowledge in light of the results of Edmund Gettier? Edmund Gettier, a fascinating man and philosopher, right? So like I'll tell you a little bit of his story. He only published this one article. This is an amazing thing. This article has been cited so many times that it holds like world records for the most cited piece of philosophical writing in the fewest number of words, because it's only 2 pages. And, you know, he was a professor at University of Boston, Amherst, or University of Massachusetts, Amherst, for a long time in his life, and he supervised a whole bunch of students and their dissertations, but he only ever published this one short piece, and that was it, nothing before or after that. It's like the ultimate mic drop, if you will. Like he destroys this classical account of knowledge that had existed for thousands of years and had nothing more to say before or after that. He doesn't try to solve the problem, he just opens this can of worms and shows us that the existing definition is not fully complete. And now it's left to the generations of post-Gettier epistemologists to try and revise or reestablish the definition of knowledge in light of his results. So it's kind of interesting. There's like the post and the prior to Gettier era. It's like there's a before and after in terms of his work. In literature, sometimes there have been powerful writers that only did a little bit of work, like some have read Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. He did publish a few other things, Franny and Zoe and 5 stories, but for the most part, it's like one major work and nothing else. But Gettier wasn't as hermetic as Salinger. I think, you know, he's a sociable guy, but he just didn't really want to publish a bunch. He had one revolutionary paper, and I guess that was enough for his legacy. He actually just recently passed away, so rest in peace. But I think it was this year, actually, maybe, or it was last year. It was very recent. So anyway, Edmund Gettier. We're going to learn about why he thinks that the classical account of knowledge fails. It involves some interesting hypothetical scenarios that are presented by him. But yeah, after we learn about Gettier's criticism of the classical account of knowledge, we'll spend a lot of time this semester trying to see various attempts to edit, modify, change the definition of knowledge in a way that is common sense and intuitive, but that would overcome the counterexamples of Gettier. So, epistemology, the theory of knowledge. What is knowledge? We have to first of all understand words like proposition, truth, belief, justification, epistemic agent. Then we know that a justified true belief was the classic account of knowledge offered to us thousands of years ago. We hear it defended in this piece of writing by Plato, where his teacher Socrates discusses with the general Meno why it is better to have a justified true belief, knowledge, as opposed to a mere correct opinion. And for him, justification is a key ingredient in the definition of knowledge, because it's what converts and upgrades a correct opinion, a lucky guess, into something that is more durable and resilient, something that stays in your mind. The metaphor of the Daedalus statues and ropes is supposed to drive that point home, that with the ropes, these statues are now going to stay with you. It's the same beautiful statue with or without the ropes. And so I guess that's one way of saying that if you have a correct opinion, it can have utility for you for the moment because it's true. but it won't stay in your mind for as long as you would like, given it doesn't have justification. So placing justification behind it grounds it, and then it stays with you. So let me just, I guess, let you guys go. I think we got through this material pretty well. I liked our discussion of it. If there's any questions, just let me know with a few last minutes here. But if not, let me know that. Are we all good? Everyone's good? Questions are fine, and the material's clear for the moment? Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna let you guys go. I have my office hours 11 to 12. You may or may not need those, but you have the link if you need it. And I'll see you in class on Monday. So no more Zoom meetings. I'm not gonna be sending you any more links to class meetings, but I will send you the recording of today. So you at least have a few from our first week to refer to later in the semester if you need it. But for now, I guess then, guys, take it easy. Have a great weekend. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person on Monday. All right, then. Hey, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Yes. So thanks again. I'll see you guys soon.